Constantine was born in 272 CE in Naissus, a city on the frontier of the Roman Empire. His father, Constantius, a distinguished officer of the empire, and his mother, Helena, a woman of deep faith and quiet resolve, raised him in a world of shifting power and uncertainty. Even as a child, Constantine observed the movements of soldiers, the strategies whispered in council chambers, and the way ambition could both elevate and destroy. The empire was vast, its reach immense, yet the intrigues of the courts and the ambitions of men made survival a constant challenge. Every day, the young Constantine learned that power was not inherited alone. It was earned, and often, it was secured at the cost of loyalty and friendship. As Constantine grew older, he was sent to court to receive education in both the military arts and governance. He studied maps of the empire, observing its vulnerabilities, and listened to debates among the elders about the stability of distant provinces. The stories of previous rulers who had risen and fallen haunted him, and he began to understand the precarious balance between strength and wisdom. He watched the tension in the courts, the subtle gestures of betrayal, and the quiet victories of those who knew how to maneuver through danger. The boy's mind became a careful observer, noting every alliance, every quarrel, and every silent threat, understanding that every gesture in the halls of power could carry the weight of life and death. In his youth, Constantine faced tests not only from the outside world, but from within his own family. His father's position in the empire demanded constant movement and political alignment, and young Constantine was required to accompany him on tours of the provinces. Each journey exposed him to the realities of administration and the burdens of leadership. He saw governors ignore the pleas of citizens, soldiers act under fear and loyalty, and officials manipulate the law for personal gain. These experiences shaped his understanding that rulership demanded both decisiveness and a keen eye for justice, even when the consequences were uncertain. Amidst the political lessons, Constantine also encountered the spiritual fabric of the empire. The empire was a mosaic of beliefs, with pagan rituals, mystery cults, and the growing presence of Christianity. Young Constantine observed the quiet devotion of Christians, their steadfastness in prayer, and the debates that raged between believers of different faiths. He saw the fragility of peace when belief clashed with authority and began to ponder the power of conviction. Could a single belief guide the course of an empire? And if so, what would it require to protect and elevate such a belief above centuries of tradition? By the time Constantine reached adolescence, his reputation for intelligence and composure had begun to spread. He was sent to study under notable scholars and military leaders, learning tactics, diplomacy, and the art of rhetoric. Each day, he practiced speaking before audiences, analyzing the responses of those around him, and testing the limits of persuasion. He noticed how decisions, however small, could ripple through the lives of thousands. A simple word in the wrong moment could ignite rebellion. A gesture of trust could save a province from ruin. These early lessons etched themselves into his mind, preparing him for a destiny that seemed both uncertain and inevitable. Constantine's early years were also marked by subtle rivalries. Other young nobles, aware of his family's growing influence, tested him, challenged him in games of skill and strategy, and sought to undermine him in small ways. Through these encounters, Constantine honed his patience and discernment. He learned to read the intentions behind words and the implications behind gestures. Each confrontation became a lesson in observation, each challenge a training ground for leadership. He began to understand that survival required both courage and prudence, and that influence was often more effective than force when wielded correctly. As he matured, Constantine faced moral and philosophical questions that many of his peers ignored. What was the true measure of strength? Could power be wielded for the greater good, or was it always tainted by ambition? And in a world of relentless change, how could one remain true to principles while navigating the demands of survival and authority? These reflections occupied his nights as he lay awake, thinking about the future of his family, his empire, and the unseen forces that seemed to guide history. By the end of his youth, Constantine had become a young man of remarkable composure and vision. He had witnessed the fragility of alliances, the subtle dangers of ambition, and the quiet power of belief. His experiences had taught him to act decisively, to weigh every move carefully, and to consider not only the immediate consequences, but the long-term impact of each decision. The stage was now set for a confrontation with destiny, a series of choices and battles that would not only define his life but change the course of the empire itself. Viewer question, to include naturally for engagement. If you were in Constantine's position, seeing both danger and opportunity all around, which path would you take? Bold action that risks everything, or cautious patience that may delay destiny? Constantine's path to power began as the empire itself trembled with instability. His father, Constantius, had risen to become one of the tetrarchs, ruling the western provinces of the Roman Empire. Yet the empire was fractured by rival claims and restless generals. Constantine, still young but sharp-minded, accompanied his father on campaigns, observing the delicate balance between loyalty and ambition. Each province revealed its own dangers: governors who acted independently, soldiers who weighed allegiance against opportunity, and citizens whose support could turn a tide of war. From the front lines to the council chambers, Constantine absorbed lessons in leadership that would later define his reign. When Constantius returned to the western capital, Constantine remained in the imperial court as a nominal hostage, a common practice among ambitious rulers to ensure loyalty. But far from being a prisoner, he became a keen observer of the political landscape. He noted the tensions between co-rulers, the subtle rivalries, and the shifting loyalties of men who spoke one truth to your face while plotting another in secret. These early lessons sharpened his instincts. He learned to navigate intrigue with precision, to act decisively yet cautiously, and to trust only those whose loyalty had been proven over time. As Constantine reached his late teens, rumors of rebellion and unrest began to circulate across the empire. Military commanders, sensing weakness, began to test the limits of authority, and provincial governors acted independently, collecting taxes and enforcing laws with little regard for the central power. Constantine's observations were meticulous. He watched which men would bend under pressure, which would seek advantage, and which could be persuaded to serve a higher purpose. These patterns became the foundation of his strategy, understanding not only the immediate danger but the long-term consequences of every alliance or enmity. Constantine's reputation grew as he displayed intelligence and courage in small campaigns, earning the loyalty of soldiers who recognized his capability. He began to command respect, not merely through his family name, but through his skill in strategy, leadership, and negotiation. Each victory, each carefully calculated decision, reinforced the perception that Constantine was a man capable of commanding both men and circumstances. And yet, he faced constant challenges. Rival claimants to power, both within the military and the court, tested him with ambushes, political traps, and subtle manipulations that could destroy a lesser leader. One pivotal moment came when Constantine was appointed to lead a small but strategic campaign in a contested province. His success relied on his ability to anticipate the movements of both allies and enemies, to motivate troops under harsh conditions, and to exploit weaknesses in the opposition without exposing his own vulnerabilities. The campaign, though minor in scale, became a proving ground for his vision of leadership. He realized that true power required both foresight and flexibility, the capacity to act decisively while remaining adaptable to unforeseen events. Meanwhile, tensions within the tetrarchy grew. Co-emperors and usurpers emerged, each claiming legitimacy, and the empire threatened to fracture further. Constantine's name began to circulate as a rising star. A man capable of navigating the chaos of multiple claimants, skilled both in diplomacy and the art of war. He began to form discreet alliances, choosing carefully which generals and governors would be loyal in the battles ahead. These alliances were often delicate, maintained with subtle gestures, calculated promises, and the understanding that betrayal could be as deadly as any sword. During this time, Constantine's personal philosophy began to take shape. He pondered the nature of power, the responsibility of leadership, and the consequences of choices made in moments of crisis. He questioned the motivations of those around him, seeking not only loyalty but conviction, and began to see that vision and idea of what the empire could become was as important as military strength. The young emperor-to-be understood that to rise above the chaos, he would need not only soldiers, but a strategy that combined intelligence, timing, and a deep understanding of human ambition. As the empire's instability reached a peak, Constantine faced his first direct test of authority. A rival claimant rose in the western provinces, rallying support with promises of wealth and power. Constantine, aware that hesitation could mean defeat, prepared his forces, assessed the loyalty of his allies, and anticipated the enemy's moves. The resulting confrontation was not merely a battle of armies, but a contest of strategy, perception, and timing. Victory required not just courage but insight, the ability to predict, adapt, and act with precision. By the campaign's end, Constantine had secured a decisive position, solidifying both his reputation and his influence within the fractured empire. Yet even as he gained power, questions lingered. Could a single man truly reshape the empire's destiny amidst such chaos? Were the alliances he forged strong enough to withstand betrayal? Could the loyalty of men, often fickle and self-interested, be relied upon in the decisive moments ahead? These questions followed him like shadows, reminders that each step toward power carried both opportunity and risk. Viewer question: to engage. If you were Constantine, facing multiple rivals and uncertain loyalties, would you act boldly to seize control, or wait for a safer moment that might never? By 312 CE, Constantine had solidified his position as a major contender for control of the Western Roman Empire, yet he faced the formidable challenge of Maxentius, a rival emperor entrenched in Rome itself. The stakes could not have been higher. The outcome of this conflict would determine who would command the empire's western provinces and potentially reshape the fate of millions. The tension across the lands was palpable, as every town, every garrison, and every road to the capital became part of a web of strategy, observation, and anticipation. Constantine, aware that hesitation could mean disaster, prepared his army with meticulous care, knowing that the loyalty of his men would be tested as severely as the strength of his strategy. On the eve of battle, Constantine's mind was restless. Accounts later tell of a vision, a radiant sign in the sky, a cross of light accompanied by the words, "In this sign, conquer." Whether interpreted as divine guidance or the culmination of intuition and experience, the vision marked a turning point. The young emperor resolved to embrace its meaning, ordering his soldiers to adorn their shields with the symbol that had appeared before him. Each man, from veteran legionary to newest recruit, carried not only armor and weapons but a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that they were part of a cause larger than mere conquest. The battle itself unfolded with a mixture of calculated strategy and chaotic intensity. The Tiber River ran alongside the battlefield, its currents threatening to drown both the weary and the overconfident. The terrain favored no one entirely, demanding constant adjustment and vigilance. Constantine's forces advanced with discipline, executing maneuvers designed to exploit the weaknesses of Maxentius' army. Cavalry charges, infantry formations, and tactical retreats combined into a complex rhythm of war, where a single misstep could reverse the outcome. Amid the clash of swords and the cries of soldiers, Constantine's leadership became evident. Every order was deliberate, every action measured to maximize both morale and tactical advantage. As the day progressed, Maxentius' forces began to falter. Reports suggest that fear and confusion spread through the enemy ranks, magnified by Constantine's precise strikes and the unwavering confidence of his troops. The Tiber, swollen and treacherous, became a trap for many of Maxentius' soldiers, who found themselves swept away in the chaotic retreat. By the end of the battle, victory belonged unmistakably to Constantine, securing his position as the dominant power in the Western Roman Empire. The triumph was more than military. It was symbolic, an assertion that destiny could favor those who combined vision, courage, and strategy. Yet the questions lingered even after the battlefield fell silent. How much of the victory was due to human skill, and how much to the guiding force that Constantine believed he had witnessed? Would this moment define the future of the empire, or would new rivals arise to challenge his authority? Could a single man, even after such a decisive victory, truly secure the loyalty and stability of a fragmented realm? These uncertainties hung in the air, reminders that power achieved through conflict demanded continual vigilance and insight. Following the battle, Constantine's actions transformed more than his own position. They reshaped the relationship between faith and governance. The use of the cross as a unifying symbol began to ripple through the empire, hinting at a future where belief would influence not only personal devotion but political legitimacy and social order. The empire, vast and diverse, would gradually witness a shift in its spiritual landscape, as a single vision translated into a policy that encouraged acceptance and protection of Christianity. Despite the victory, Constantine faced immediate challenges. Consolidating authority required careful management of alliances, suppression of remaining opposition, and reinforcement of confidence among soldiers and citizens alike. Every decision now carried both political and spiritual weight, intertwining the demands of empire with the emerging influence of a faith that had been largely suppressed. Constantine understood that the consequences of each action would reverberate far beyond the battlefield, shaping both his legacy and the future of generations to come. Viewer question: to engage. If you were in Constantine's place, having witnessed a vision that promised victory, would you trust it completely or rely only on strategy and experience? After his decisive victory over Maxentus, Constantine emerged not only as the ruler of the Western Roman Empire but as a figure whose influence would shape the spiritual and political future of the empire. The consolidation of power required both careful governance and bold decisions. One of the most transformative acts of his reign was the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, which granted Christians the freedom to practice their faith without fear of persecution. The edict was not merely a legal decree. It was a deliberate effort to stabilize the empire, unify its diverse populations, and establish a moral and ideological foundation for governance. The impact of the edict was immediate and profound. Christian communities that had previously operated in secrecy were now able to build churches, organize congregations, and participate openly in the civic life of the empire. Temples and properties confiscated during previous persecutions were restored, signaling a dramatic shift in both authority and social order. Constantine's policies created an unprecedented environment in which belief could flourish alongside imperial power, intertwining faith with the very structure of governance. Citizens and soldiers alike began to recognize the emerging connection between loyalty to the emperor and alignment with a faith that now carried legal recognition. Implementing these reforms required careful diplomacy. Constantine navigated a delicate balance, ensuring that pagan traditions and the beliefs of long-standing religious institutions were not immediately alienated. He understood that the empire's stability depended on maintaining cohesion, while introducing a transformative change. His advisors debated the extent of his support for Christianity, the handling of pagan temples, and the management of the army's morale. Constantine's decisions reflected both strategic thinking and visionary leadership. He sought not only to avoid rebellion but to gradually guide the empire toward a unified ethical and spiritual framework. The emperor's personal convictions began to influence public policy in subtle yet significant ways. He commissioned the construction of Christian basilicas, supported the ordination of clergy, and facilitated councils that would address theological disputes across the empire. These actions laid the foundation for a new ecclesiastical structure, ensuring that the growing Christian community had both protection and influence. Constantine recognized that religion could serve as a unifying force, providing moral guidance and reinforcing loyalty to the imperial authority. Yet even as he encouraged the faith, he remained cautious, aware that the interplay of power and belief could ignite tensions if mismanaged. Meanwhile, Constantine's domestic reforms extended beyond religious matters. He sought to stabilize the economy, reorganize taxation, and improve infrastructure, understanding that a prosperous and orderly empire was essential to maintaining authority. Roads, fortifications, and communication networks were reinforced to ensure rapid response to both internal unrest and external threats. The emperor's reforms were not merely administrative. They reflected a vision of an empire strengthened by both civic efficiency and moral cohesion. Despite these advances, challenges remained. Rival leaders, suspicious generals, and discontented governors tested Constantine's authority at every turn. His policies, though forward-looking, required constant vigilance and diplomacy to prevent backlash. The interplay of faith, politics, and personal ambition created a landscape fraught with potential for both triumph and disaster. Constantine's understanding of this delicate balance would define the remaining years of his reign, demonstrating that true power relied not only on military might, but on the ability to navigate complex human and institutional dynamics. The Edict of Milan also raised profound questions about the relationship between law and morality. Could an emperor ensure justice while influencing belief? Could the introduction of religious freedom truly stabilize the empire without creating unforeseen divisions? Constantine faced these dilemmas with both resolve and pragmatism, aware that each choice carried consequences that would echo through generations. The empire was entering a new era, one in which faith, law, and leadership intersected in ways previously unseen in Roman history. Viewer question: to engage. If you were Constantine, given the choice to support a growing religion while maintaining empire-wide stability, would you prioritize faith, law, or political control? With the Edict of Milan establishing religious tolerance and the empire gradually stabilizing under his authority, Constantine turned his attention to the broader task of consolidating power and ensuring the longevity of his rule. The western provinces were secure, yet the eastern territories remained volatile, governed by co-emperors and generals whose loyalty was uncertain. Constantine understood that to unify the empire, he needed not only military dominance, but also a symbol of enduring authority, a capital that would embody his vision for Rome's future. In 330 CE, Constantine inaugurated Byzantium as the new capital of the Roman Empire, renaming it Constantinople. The city was chosen strategically, positioned on the Bosporus Strait to control trade between Europe and Asia and to protect the empire from northern and eastern threats. But beyond its tactical significance, Constantinople was a statement of power and ambition, a city designed to reflect the glory of the emperor and the empire's new spiritual orientation. Palaces, forums, churches, and public spaces were constructed with careful attention to symbolism and architecture, blending Roman traditions with innovative design. Constantine's reign in Constantinople marked a turning point in both governance and culture. The emperor encouraged Christian scholars, artists, and leaders to participate in the life of the city, integrating faith into the fabric of urban society. By fostering this synthesis of religion, politics, and culture, Constantine created a model of imperial authority that extended beyond military conquest to the hearts and minds of his subjects. Yet the establishment of a new capital also brought challenges. The construction demanded immense resources, and the relocation of administrators, soldiers, and citizens required careful management to avoid unrest. Constantine navigated these difficulties with precision, ensuring that the city became a beacon of stability and inspiration rather than a source of division. The emperor's reforms continued alongside his urban projects. Constantine restructured the military, implementing systems of discipline and hierarchy that strengthened loyalty and efficiency. Provincial administration was streamlined to ensure swift response to rebellion or external threat, while the legal code was refined to provide clarity and justice for citizens. Every policy was designed to reinforce both the authority of the emperor and the cohesion of the empire, demonstrating Constantine's understanding that lasting power depended on the effective integration of governance, law, and faith. Constantine's personal influence extended deeply into religious affairs as well. He convened councils to resolve theological disputes, supported the construction of basilicas, and promoted leaders whose vision aligned with both the state and the growing Christian community. His interventions were subtle yet decisive, balancing the need for unity with the complexities of diverse beliefs. By positioning himself as both a temporal and moral authority, Constantine reshaped the expectations of leadership, establishing a precedent for future emperors who would intertwine political and religious legitimacy. Despite these accomplishments, the emperor faced ongoing threats. Rivals, regional unrest, and external enemies tested the resilience of his rule. Each decision required careful calculation. Military campaigns could provoke rebellion, reforms could alienate entrenched elites, and policies of religious support could be interpreted as favoritism. Constantine navigated these challenges with both strategic acumen and foresight, always mindful that the empire's stability depended on the delicate balance of authority, influence, and public perception. As Constantinople rose from the ground, it became more than a city. It was a symbol of Constantine's vision for a renewed Roman Empire, one in which faith, governance, and culture intertwined to produce lasting influence. The emperor's legacy began to take shape, not only through tangible achievements, but through the intangible power of ideas, belief, loyalty, and the potential for unity across an empire long divided by ambition and conflict. Viewer question to engage. If you were ruling an empire like Constantine, would you prioritize building a new capital as a symbol of power, or focus on strengthening existing cities and resources? By the final years of his life, Constantine had transformed the Roman Empire in ways few rulers before him could have imagined. His consolidation of power, strategic brilliance, and embrace of Christianity had reshaped not only the political landscape but the spiritual and cultural identity of the empire. From the streets of Rome to the newly founded Constantinople, the echoes of his decisions were evident in the architecture, the laws, and the growing influence of the Christian Church. The empire had become a stage on which faith and governance intertwined, each shaping the other in profound ways. Constantine's personal life, though marked by ambition and political maneuvering, reflected a complex balance between public duty and private contemplation. He navigated family dynamics, alliances, and rivalries with the same strategic mind he applied to battles and governance. His ability to combine tactical acumen with moral and religious vision allowed him to leave an indelible mark on the empire. Soldiers, citizens, and clerics alike recognized that his rule represented a turning point, a period in which the ideals of leadership were no longer limited to conquest alone but extended to law, justice, and spiritual guidance. Even as he aged, Constantine continued to influence both church and state. Councils convened under his authority addressed theological disputes, establishing precedents that would guide Christianity for centuries. He funded the construction of grand basilicas, churches, and civic buildings that embodied the principles he championed. His reforms in administration, military, and law ensured that the empire could endure beyond his lifetime, providing the framework for successors to build upon. Yet for all his achievements, Constantine was acutely aware of the fragility of power. Loyalty could shift, revolts could ignite, and the ambitions of men were never fully contained. The emperor's death in 337 CE marked the end of an era but not the cessation of his influence. The empire he had shaped continued to thrive, guided by systems, institutions, and beliefs he had established. His vision of Constantinople as a new center of power endured, becoming a beacon of culture, trade, and religion. Christian communities, once persecuted, now flourished under structures he had supported. The ripple effects of his decisions carried forward, affecting the trajectory of European and Near Eastern history for centuries. As history reflects upon Constantine, the complexity of his legacy becomes evident. He was both a man of vision and a master of strategy, a ruler whose decisions intertwined politics and faith in unprecedented ways. The questions he faced about loyalty, belief, authority, and morality were as relevant then as they are now. Each choice he made shaped the empire and influenced the lives of millions, demonstrating that leadership was both an art and a responsibility, requiring foresight, courage, and wisdom. For generations, scholars, theologians, and historians have debated the full extent of Constantine's impact. Was he a visionary guided by divine inspiration, a pragmatic strategist who understood the power of religion, or a combination of both? The debate continues because his life embodies the tension between destiny and human choice, between ambition and moral responsibility. Viewer question: to engage, do you think Constantine's vision and actions were driven more by strategy or faith? And how might the empire have evolved if he had chosen differently?